Chapter 6. The Piano. My second wife and I had been living in a beautiful townhouse we'd been renting for about a year. It was a lovely place to start our marriage, but it was now time to leave our honeymoon nest. Notice had been given, and we'd be moving out in 30 days. Because we'd be moving our belongings ourselves, there was a heaviness about one aspect of the move above all others. A piece of musical furniture that I had inherited when we married. A heavy, nearly impossible to budge, upright piano was coming along with us on this move. Understand, and I cannot stress this strongly enough to you, not one bone in my body felt like dragging a full-size, upright piano with us on this or any other possible move we might be making in some unforeseen future. The piano was a beast. The ridiculous aspect of this to me was, neither of us played. It made me stop and question why we had a piano in our possession in the first place. I posed that query to my wife, who in turn could not give me a solid, clear answer. Because she could not provide a genuine argument for keeping this piano either, was reason enough to get rid of it once and for all. So after some, shall we say, spirited debates, my wife finally agreed to part with this prized possession of hers. "Okay, I'll sell the piano, but I won't just give it away," she told me. We talked about a price she could live with and settled on $750. Once we'd agreed on the amount, we went to work. We were going to sell the piano before the move, but we weren't going to advertise or tell anyone what we were doing. As an experiment, we decided to sell this piano in our imagination only. The key to using imagination to bring about desired results is to feel how you would feel if what you imagine were already true. At this point, I could go into extensive explanation of what takes place in the invisible world when we do things this way, how each of us is a transmitter and a receiver. I could describe natural frequencies, the power of concentrated focus, feeling, thought transference, and so much more. However, it's sufficient instead to explain what happened with our experiment rather than put any attention on how and why a desire comes to fruition. By the way, playing with life like this appears downright idiotic to the intellect. You can't just imagine something into existence, it will argue. You have to do something. In this experiment, being was the doing. Being fully aware of already having sold the piano in our imagination and feeling fully excited about that was all the doing that we were going to do. Putting this postulation to the test. Every night, we went to sleep feeling certain that the transaction had already occurred and we had received the exact amount of money we had settled on. This routine and practice went on nightly until suddenly, my wife decided she didn't want to participate in this imaginary run-through any longer. She developed cold feet. To sell or not to sell became the question. I reminded her once again that neither one of us played the piano. In my opinion, which I made known to her, it was burdensome to lug this beast around with us any longer. "But I have friends who play when they come over to visit," she countered, "and I love the look and sound of this piano." I appealed to her logic and mentioned that her friends weren't coming over all that often. Plus, now that we were moving, it just made sense to let it go. We reached a reluctant agreement again and finalized it once more. She did tell me, however, I'd be on my own, and she would not participate in imagining the piano already being sold. If my experiment didn't work, then we would keep it. That was her final word on the matter. End of discussion. My sister was staying with us temporarily while all this was going on, so I invited her to join me in this experiment of living from an invisible reality as if it were an actual physical reality. I don't know why I thought I needed someone to participate with me in this exercise, but I did. She was more than willing to give it a try and envisioned the piano being sold as my wife and I had been doing. I don't remember if I mentioned the price we'd agreed upon, but I certainly must have. So now, instead of my wife and me doing this exercise, my sister and I gave it all we had. Every night and whenever we could during the day, each of us would go into an imaginary state and envision the piano as sold. The ultimate ultimatum. Moving day arrived. My wife, sister, and I loaded box after box into the U-Haul truck, working around the piano, saving it for last. It was an extraordinarily cumbersome instrument, and no one looked forward to schlepping it up into the truck. To top it off, we didn't even have a moving dolly to help us out, making it just that much more difficult to handle. The last household item was finally loaded while the piano sat in the empty living room of the townhouse. No one had come for my wife's piano, and it didn't appear that anyone would. We never talked about it, but I have a feeling my wife was actually glad that the imagination-only experiment was apparently about to fail. My sister and I moved the piano halfway out the front door, struggling to make it even that far, and just let it sit. Turning to each other, we both began cursing God for not doing his, her, or its part. We were so angry at God that we both threatened that if he, she, it didn't have someone show up right now, we were through with it forever. We both swore a solemn oath, saying to God, we will not have anything to do with you for the rest of our lives if you don't do something and do it now. As if our threatening the Almighty, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient being would actually be any kind of a threat at all. We were actually acting as if the source of everything existed outside of us somehow, that we were separate from it. How could anything exist outside of infinite consciousness? If consciousness is all-inclusive, then nothing can exist from it. There can be no such thing as separation. That part of the equation didn't cross our minds. All we knew was that we had done everything we were capable of doing. We believed that our imaginary practice would bring about our desire. After all, it had worked in the past for me, as mentioned in the previous chapter. Now, for some unknown reason, we were left hanging. Evidently, no one was going to buy this piano as we had believed had already occurred in our imagination. In physical reality, we still had a piano sitting halfway in and halfway out of the front door. By the way, every other word of this ranting, raving, and railing against God consisted of the harshest, most indecent curse words in the English language. I could pass along the words that were used, but I think I'll let that be up to your own imagination. Obviously, there was little hope left in us, and what hope there was disappearing rapidly. Ye of little faith. Within seconds after our final threat and proclamation hung in the air, a pickup truck came to an abrupt, screeching halt right in front of the townhouse. A gentleman in his early 30s stepped out of the truck and walked toward us. "You wouldn't want to sell that piano, would you?" he inquired. My sister and I stared at each other in shock and amazement as I stuttered, "Yes." "Do you mind if I come up and take a closer look?" he asked. "No, not at all. Please do," I replied, regaining my composure. Standing next to the piano in the doorway, giving it a once-over, he continued in an almost apologetic manner. "I never drive down this street. I don't know why I did today. Would it be all right if I get my wife and bring her over here? She's about to take her lunch break and would kill me if I didn't give her the chance to see this piano. We've been looking for an old upright like this one for a long, long time. I can't believe yours is for sale and that I ended up driving down this street to find it." No worries," I said. "By all means, go get her. We'll gladly wait." He walked back to his truck, turned and looked one more time at the piano, and drove off. Dumbfounded and in disbelief, my sister and I finally had the sense to move the piano back into the living room and wait for the couple's return. I hurried into the kitchen area where my wife was completing a cleaning project and told her what had just happened. She responded with an unusually suspicious look on her face, as if I were making up the whole encounter. The exchange. My sister, wife, and I were in the living room so engrossed in talking about this incredible turn of events that we didn't hear the pickup pull to a stop outside the townhouse. The couple approached the open front door and cautiously looked in, attempting not to interrupt our conversation or seem like intruders. As soon as the three of us became aware of their presence, we immediately invited them in. We exchanged pleasantries, and the excitement grew. The moment the couple walked into the living room, the piano caught the woman's eye. Of course, the townhouse was nearly empty now, so there was nothing left to catch anyone's eye other than the piano. It was obvious that she wanted it at first sight. She sat down, played a beautiful melody, then turned to her husband. The two of them quietly talked things over before approaching my wife and me. "I honestly do love the way this piano looks and sounds," she said. Then, speaking directly to my wife, she added, "I have no idea what you want for it, but we can give you only $750. There it was, the exact amount we had agreed on a few weeks earlier. I looked at my wife and gave her the opportunity to say yay or nay. After all, it was her piano to sell or keep. My wife took a few moments and finally said, "Yes, it's yours." The couple was thrilled that an agreement had been reached without haggling over a price. Standing hand in hand, the two of them basked in the glow of pure delight. Admittedly, they were in a quandary now. They had just purchased a beautiful upright piano, but had no way to transport it to their home. The answer to me was obvious, and I told them so. "Look, we have this U-Haul truck right in front of us. There's just room enough to fit the piano into it. We'll load it up and take it to your house." My sister then chimed in and offered a free tuning once the piano was positioned where they wanted it in their home. The couple could not have been more appreciative and accepted what they considered being a beyond belief generous offer. The deal was done. We loaded the piano into the U-Haul truck and we delivered it to its new home. On a personal note, I could not have been more grateful knowing that I would never again have to load or unload that musical monstrosity. Loading and unloading that piano one last time released a heavy weight off my shoulders. Once the job was done, I kept saying to myself over and over again, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Oh, I was almost giddy. Without reservation, I can say I was as happy to be rid of that piano as the new owners were to have it. Who's really in charge? My sister and I had done all that we could do. It was then up to creative intelligence to move around all the participating players in perfect timing and produce the desired outcome for everyone involved. Our demands were only our fears surfacing. I can't presuppose or picture a supreme being cowering down in response to an ultimatum issued by its creations. It was a remarkable feeling to partake in an incomprehensible event such as selling my wife's piano, and doing so through imagination as the only doing. The unfoldment and timing was optimal and impeccable. What a fantastic thing to be a part of. Was this entirely composed of happenstance or divine intervention? Can we, through clarity, focus, and feeling, bring our desires to fruition? What if we truly realize that imagination does create reality and that we are always imagining something? We're always saying, "I am this or that." These examples I've been sharing in this book are meant to inspire those of you who allow yourself to go beyond the idea of mere happenstance as the only answer. For those who have rigidly held on to the concept that physical reality is the only reality there is, can you at least crack open the door to see a broader possibility? Think about it. Where does everything originate? There isn't one thing you can name that didn't first start out as an image, an idea in someone's imagination. Not one thing. So if beliefs, perceptions, thoughts, and feelings do create our reality, wouldn't it be wise to use the power of imagination and choice to create a reality we want to experience, rather than living by default, acting as if we are powerless and without choice? Do you realize that you can think whatever thoughts you choose and feel any way you want to feel, regardless of circumstances or situations you may find yourself in?